This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. It's great to be back at the desk with you this weekend. Yeah, it's a little bit different scenario. Mr. Pearson will be back here next weekend on our broadcast, but we're going to talk about wrapping up 2023 in terms of the sales of farm equipment and farmland, and do a little peering into the future also with the help of folks who are so expert at that. They know what's going on. Mr. Mark Stock, who joins me here at the desk, has his fingers on the pulse of what's happening as co-owner and co-founder of Big Iron Auctions. Good to see you again, sir.
Oh, Max, it is great to be here.
I think we were together back in the heat of summer at the Half Century of Progress. I guess I'd like to know what's happened since then, and what have we seen in terms of sales this year of equipment compared to 2022?
Well, in 2023, we had an outstanding year, great year. Sold for close to 10,000 different sellers, Max, using the online platform. Had 47,000 different buyers, as we've topped 122,000 different lots of machinery that sold in 2023. So hats off to all the guys and gals that make up the organization that handled that volume of equipment. But you know, we're seeing the machinery market holding stable, a little softer in some areas, a little stronger in others, but still plenty higher than it was pre-COVID.
We want to talk a little bit later with your colleague Dan Sullivan about what's happening in the land end of the business. You folks got together in your enterprises, and it's made a great partnership, it strikes me. But you mentioned COVID. Things have really changed. It's aligned us in a different fashion as to how we do business, and that includes buying equipment.
Online specifically, because the COVID forced a lot of people that needed machinery to be used in their operation to go on the internet to bid and buy, because open outcry business was no longer being able to be conducted. So our registrations during that time period just spiked tremendously high. And now we have all that data in our database, and we use all that information, of course, to help market the equipment that's sold today. But all the people that were reluctant, Max, at that first few years of the internet business of bidding and buying, because they always wanted to touch it and feel it and hear it run, they were forced into participating in an online auction. But we try to provide as many pictures and video as possible to get them as comfortable as possible pre-COVID auction-wise.
That requires quite a bit of teamwork on behalf of your folks out there in the field. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But speaking of folks in the field, let's join Ryan Harbour now to get a little bit of a grasp on what's happening in that Plain States area. Ryan?
I'm here in central Nebraska, and we're super excited to share with you guys some amazing auctions that we have coming up in January, February, and March on BigIron.com. And I just want to start with a sale over in Shickley, Nebraska. Bear Creek Farms lining up a nice sale for us for late January. Some of the highlighted pieces of that auction would be a John Deere 7820 mechanical front tractor with 746 loader, alongside a nice John Deere 8400 as well. That same seller also has some really nice seeding equipment, a John Deere 1890 air seeder and a 1910 cart, along with the John Deere 1720 stack fold planter. So you'll want to keep your eyes peeled for that sale, because again, that's a nice one coming up in Shickley, Nebraska. Now, Pat Hannon up in Shelton, Nebraska has got two really good tractors that we're excited about selling for him. I've known Pat a long time, and his equipment is top notch. And so he's got a John Deere 8R250 with virtually no hours on it. That tractor is in amazing shape. And then he also has a John Deere 8225R, and that tractor would be a 2010 model. So it's right prime for the taking for anybody interested in a pre-emissions tractor there. Down the road to the south a little bit in Franklin, Nebraska, we've got the Ingram Farms retirement, and that retirement sale is a full line of John Deere equipment that Ingram's will be selling. Again, that's coming up in late January in Franklin, Nebraska. Moving a little bit further out west, we certainly have a nice project that we started in Arapahoe, Wyoming for Fegler Farms, coming up on January 25th out in Arapahoe, Wyoming. Real nice sale there. Some older equipment, but also very well cared for. Interestingly enough, the pieces of equipment that are super exciting on that sale would be two New Holland stack liner machines that they have, and one of those machines only having about 900 hours on it in super good shape. So you're going to want to check that out if you're an alfalfa producer that's looking for some good hay equipment. Fegler Farms, Arapahoe, Wyoming, January 25th is where you're going to find that. And then generally speaking, just in Montana, Idaho, Utah, and Colorado. We've got a lot of fun stuff working out there, a lot of good dealer packages coming up here that we're working to finalize for February and early March, as well as a couple retirement sales that we're working on there. So many things going on, so many moving parts. Again, like I said, we're touching a lot of things across a lot of states here in Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Montana, and Idaho. And we're excited to share it all with you guys on BigIron.com coming right up.
Ryan, thank you so much. He's going to be a busy boy at the first 3 months, first quarter of this new year. Your folks in the field do work together as a team, and it strikes me that they not only know equipment, they know many of the farm families they're working with. I mean, as you listen to Ryan, that's one thing that occurred to me.
Yes, well, our reps, first of all, Max, most of them are ag-based. So when they come out to the seller's farm or ranch, they know how to start the tractor. They know how to drive it around. They have tremendous product knowledge, which helps in describing the equipment that's being sold, because a unique thing about what happens on BigIron.com, the machine it'll move 305 miles on average from where it originates from.
Oh, wait a minute, go over that number again. On the average sale of a piece of equipment, the movement will be as much as 300 miles away.
It's averaging 305 miles right now. So a lot of the folks don't come to look at it. They rely on the information that's provided with the picture sets and the videos, and our reps do all of that work. And the reps, they live in those communities in which they serve. So the way our model works, they all have 1, 2, maybe 3 counties, depending on the density or population of the space. So they're going to church, they're going to the basketball games and football games, they're at the cafe, and they're talking to the folks that they're working for. And that's one of the reasons why it works so well and why we can get so much work done.
How many reps do you have out there then across the country?
It's over 250, and we're always looking for good quality men and women that want to be a part of our organization.
You need to be somebody who is indeed firmly grounded in agriculture, and they know what's going on in the world around them there.
Well, it definitely helps, because I mean, a seller can identify somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about. So we teach and train all types of machinery to all of our salespeople. We have a good training program. We want them to be well versed on not only what they know, but what they don't know. And then they have their counterparts that they can rely on in the event that there is a unique piece out there that they need more information on.
I suppose those reps can also answer a lot of questions for the farmer who may say, well, how do we go about this? You know, they are the ones who really will ease them into the process of everything that needs to be done and give them plenty of time, as you've told me in the past.
Totally, yes. So the process and explanation of the process to the sellers is a key component, because they've never done that before if they're retiring. Now, a big part of our business, though, Max, is from repeat sellers. So a lot of folks that may have 1, 2, or 3 items of machinery that they no longer use in their operation, well, they call us up and we sell it for them, and then they reinvest those monies into items that actually will work in their operation at the current moment. And what is very unique is sometimes you look at something in your shed and you go, well, nobody uses that anymore. Well, with the reach of Big Iron right now, whether you have a cultivator that you don't use, well, there may be an organic farmer 2 or 3 states away, you can't find that machine. So that's one of the unique things about what Big Iron works for everybody.
And don't let that thing just sit there.
Don't
Get
let
that
it
thing
sit
on the
there.
market, right?
Correct.
All right. We want to talk a little more with you. Don't go away. Mark Stock, among our guests this weekend from Big Iron Auctions. We'll visit with Dan Sullivan coming up here in just a few minutes, too. So stay with us on this special edition of This Week in Agribusiness. As we continue our discussion this weekend with the folks from Big Iron, let's talk about how an individual prepares, how the team at Big Iron works with that seller of equipment at Big Iron Auctions. Joining us here at the desk is Maverick Woodside, Director of Auction Services. Auction Services, what all does that involve, Maverick?
Yeah, so a lot of folks might not know it, but we have a huge team of people that help support our auctions and prep that equipment prior to the sale. So we have folks that come in and detail, move equipment, stage equipment, take photos, take detailed descriptions. It's a really thorough process that goes into getting ready for an auction.
You mentioned detailing equipment. That's to put it in its best appearance, and appearance does matter, doesn't it?
That's absolutely correct. We take a lot of pride in presenting that equipment in the best light possible pre-auction, and that's really important to us. We bring in pressure washers and guys that are really skilled at getting stuff as presentable as possible for a sale.
Do you ever have any owners who say, well, do you really need to do all that stuff? I mean, some of them might wonder about the value that is brought, but it actually can relate to dollars and cents, an increase in value.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd say there's a lot of sellers that are surprised at the amount of work that we go to when we come into a farmer's yard. we'll do everything above and beyond to make sure that that stuff will be shed in the best light possible.
The public inspection is an important part of the whole process when folks can actually look at it. How does that work? Give us a feel for that.
Yeah, as Mark alluded to, we don't have public outcry auctions anymore, so it's really important for folks to still see that equipment. So we'll often schedule an inspection day. Folks will come out, view the equipment, visit with the seller, really get the seller's story behind that equipment, and we again think that drives performance on these auctions.
I have heard that in this interaction that takes place between your team that comes onto the farm and that often farm family selling the equipment, there's a relationship there that after the sale, in fact, people really appreciate that time it was spent together.
That's right. We still hear from sellers all the time. Oftentimes our guys that go out and set these sales up might spend more time with that seller than the actual rep does because of the time it takes to get this stuff ready. So we still have sellers reach out all the time. They'll send us text message, check in on us. They'll see us on the road and give us a call. So yeah, the relationship we build with those sellers is pretty remarkable.
I feature old tractors in a segment on our television show, and I always tell folks, get around there. Show me the various aspects of that old tractor. The staging, the setup for the photography, just like, folks who are involved in the livestock business, getting that best shot is crucial in maximizing the value of the equipment, isn't it?
Absolutely. We pull stuff out, get it in the best light possible, pay close attention to the background when we take images. Again, it's just trying to represent that equipment to the best of its ability for the seller to drive that price performance.
I've heard it's been busy out there over the past few weeks. Let's go to the field to find out. Cody Holst is right in the heart of the country, and I understand, Cody, it's been a busy past few weeks for you.
Max, I wanted to touch base with you from the Midwest region. We just came off a record fall with over 109 equipment and land auctions in November and December alone. We couldn't be more excited about what we have coming in the spring of 2024, consisting of land, equipment, livestock, classic car, and dealer auctions. We look forward to serving our current and future customers in the coming year.
My goodness, Cody, you've been busy. Classic cars, I heard you say as well. Let's switch now to Colby Hennis in Illinois to give us an update on what's happening in her part of the country, what she sees. Colby?
Hey Max, we have a bunch of great auctions coming up here after the first of the year in the state of Illinois. Our first auction to kick us off has a bunch of late model John Deere equipment coming to us from Tampico, Illinois on the Greg and Nancy Forward Retirement Auction. It will take place on January 16th, and then we'll move to Shelbyville, Illinois for the Kevin McKittrick Retirement Auction. Also late model John Deere equipment on that auction. And then kind of towards the end of the month, we'll move to Indris Farms auction, which will be on January 23rd in Henry, Illinois. For more information on these retirement auctions, please look at our websites, sullivanauctioneers.com and bigironauctions.com. Back to you, Max.
Hey, thanks, Colby, for that report. You mentioned some communities we know very well. We've traveled into some of those places over the past few years. As we come back to visit here a little bit about all that goes into selling Maverick, I guess one thing that comes to mind is how your team operates on the ground there. And it's not just cleaning, it's not just staging of the equipment. There's a lot that goes into it, including interaction with the family or absentee owners who perhaps are selling the equipment. Talk a bit about that.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, I mean, even after a sale, we can go in and load out that equipment. If they're an estate sale where they don't have that ability to help load out the equipment, we offer that service as well. And it's just important to remember that a lot of folks that go through retirement or estate sale, they're going to do it one time, and we have an obligation to get it right. That's what our business has been founded on for the last 40 plus years, and so we take a lot of pride in that, and that's what we feel separates us from others.
So you talk about helping load out the equipment. You'll bring your own equipment in then to help facilitate that process.
That's right. We have skid steers, wheel loaders. We can rent equipment if needed to bring in, but we're well equipped to help a seller disperse that equipment after the auction.
So end to end, you help that landowner.
That's right, yeah. We feel like it's a white glove service. When we come in and help you with your sale, we're going to handle everything from start to finish. We have a listings team in the background that verifies listings, looks at titles, make sure everything is in order so that when we do go to sell that equipment, it's guaranteed to be correct.
I bet some of these folks who sell equipment have seen your personnel on their property before. There's quite a bit of repeat business, I would imagine.
That's right. This type of service leads others to our front door as well. Word of mouth is very impactful. And again, when we go out on the farm and we can resonate with a seller, they'll tell other sellers, and one thing kind of leads to another.
this can be kind of a challenging experience for some. Selling the equipment. I think of the emotion that can be wrapped up in it. You've worked with this equipment throughout your career. Some of these pieces of equipment may have been there with you from the very beginning. Maybe you're torn as to whether or not you want to sell that old Super M or some of the older tractors that you had. I would imagine your field representatives are more than happy to have that conversation and bring out some important points that the seller should be thinking about.
Absolutely. It is an emotional thing. When a farmer sells a tractor, he spent hours in that tractor. He remembers buying it. He remembers changing the oil on it. And we just try and guide them through that process and help them understand why those things are important and how we can best highlight that for them throughout the auction process.
Is there anything we wouldn't ordinarily think about that your team members handle out there on the scene when we're talking about auction services? There's a lot that goes on before and after, but is there anything that maybe just wouldn't occur to you that your folks have done in the past and are prepared to do?
Yeah, there's always oddball things that might need done. There could be several farm locations that we may need to help, collect all that equipment up and get it to one central location for the seller. That's something we often do. And I think a lot of people are always surprised when we come in with our own equipment and help them line that up. But again, it's a start to finish process. And I think some sellers are under the impression that they got to do a lot of work. When you hire Big Iron, when you hire Sullivan Auctioneers, we're going to get you through that entire process.
One thing that occurs to me is there are days perhaps when you're out there to photograph and to stage the equipment. Maybe they're not perfect in terms of weather, but you work with that. Your photographers, no doubt, know what they're doing, know how to set up the equipment, know how to position it to put it in the best light.
Absolutely right. In fact, if we got to go back once, twice, 3 times to get that best picture, we'll do it. I've often sent guys back out in the field to produce a better image because it's important. It's what we take pride in. It's what we're known for, and we take it very, very seriously.
And among that team there on the ground working with that seller will be a local representative, right?
That's right.
Big Iron?
Yep, that's right. We often work with the sales rep in the field. They help us take pictures. They, again, guide that seller through the whole process while we're there with them.
Maverick, thank you so much for sharing the story with us. It's a great story. Maverick Woodside joining us here on this special edition of This Week in Agribusiness. Oh yes, land will be on our radar screen in just a few minutes too, as we'll be visiting with Dan Sullivan in this special edition of our broadcast this weekend. This Week in Agribusiness, wrapping up 2023 and moving right into the exciting new year ahead. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Welcome back here to This Week in Agribusiness. Happy New Year from us to you and your family. It's a special edition of the broadcast this weekend as we're talking about land sales and equipment sales with the folks from Big Iron and Sullivan Auctions. Dan Sullivan is the chief auctioneer there at Sullivan Auctions, well, a division of Big Iron. Yeah, they got together here just a few months ago in one great family working for producers. We know, Dan, the Sullivan name is so well known in the agriculture sector. You folks have been in the business for quite some time, and I just want to get an update from you on what's happening with ag land sales. What have you been experiencing?
Well, thank you, Max, for the opportunity to visit here today. I hope everybody had a great Christmas. But, the land market has stayed remarkably strong. Max, there's obviously, the commodity prices are not as snappy, as aggressive as they were a year ago. The interest rates are not as good as they were. They've moved up, but the land's kind of weathered the storm, and just seen some really strong prices this fall, and it's a lot of interest in this land too. So the land market's holding firm.
Can you share a couple of examples of recent land sales that you've handled?
Well, we've had land auctions, obviously, not only throughout central Illinois and the entire state of Illinois, but Iowa, Missouri, Indiana, Minnesota, the Big Iron Company, a lot of land auctions out west. We sold some ground in central Illinois, probably in the last of August, Max, the first part of September. 30,000 an acre on 2 or 3 tracks, and followed up with some ground for $26,000, $400 an acre. And quite a bit of that good Class A ground, Max, is still north of 20,000. It's also a little bit geographical. You get into different areas. Sometimes the same caliber of farm in a different county will bring a little less than well in another county. So, but a lot of ground north of 20,000 an acre still on this good productive land.
I just happened to think about the lay of the land where you folks are located there in the Mississippi River Valley. There's a lot of hunting land, a lot of recreational land. I would imagine you handle quite a bit of that too, do you not, Dan?
Yeah, we do. We get a lot of questions, Max, about the recreation and hunting type ground. I guess if there was a little bit of a weakness, there's sometimes on this recreation hunting ground, it's probably suffered a little bit more than some of the other ones, and you get a margin of tract of ground. Maybe that's not top soil. We've seen a little bit of weakness there, but I'd say that the hunting ground off a little bit. As what it was, a year or 2 years ago. But there along the Mississippi River in our area, we saw a lot of hunting ground, and there's still a lot of demand for it, but a little softer market there, Max.
When you get into some of the metropolitan areas, it's hard to miss that sprawl of the big warehouses out through there. That isn't softening much at all, is it, Dan? What are you seeing there outside some of our cities?
No, it isn't. And there's a lot of 1031 money out there, a little more so this fall, maybe than what we saw last year. There's people that have sold, ground in different areas and doing the like kind of exchange. And and when you get that 1031 money involved in that land market, then you can see it kind of firming up in some of these stronger prices. But there's still the farmers and the ranchers and the investors are smart people, and they're sitting on quite a bit of cash. And for over the long haul, there's never been a better place to invest your money than in farmland, and there's just a lot of demand out there still for it.
You mentioned investors. If somebody looks at this as a portion of their portfolio tracked over time, it performs very well, does it not?
It sure does, and we've been doing this for now going on 45 years, and there's always ups and downs. There's always valleys and hills, but when you look at it over the long haul, when ground hit 10,000 an acre. And it doesn't seem like that long ago, Max. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, it hit 10. And then when it hit 12 and 13, the 10 was kind of the new normal. And then 15 and 20. So, the highs always get higher. And it does sometimes come down, but it never gets as low as it did. And then when the high gets a little higher. So again, over the long haul, I think investors know that that's a good place to invest in farmland. And we're seeing a lot of that.
Hey, we appreciate the update, Dan. We look forward to visiting with you again somewhere along the way, but we wish you well as we go on into 2024. Hope it's a wonderful year for you, Dan Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. And be sure to tell Orion and Gloria Samuelson to have a great new year.
Oh, we sure will, Dan, and I'm sure they would say extend the greeting to Mr. Sullivan as well. Let's zero in on one part of the country now. Let's go to Nebraska, where John Stock is watching what's happening there and gives us an update on some upcoming sales in that important state.
Hey Max, thank you. Just wanted to share with you a couple land auctions today. The first one's 160 acres of flat to gently sloping pivot irrigated crop ground in Holt County, Nebraska, located just southeast of O'Neill. My sellers, Gary and Rose Baden, are offering this farm up to the highest bidder on January 23rd, 2024. All the personal property will be included in the sale, which is a 10-tower pivot, a diesel power unit, a generator, and fuel barrel. This property was farmed as fully organic in 2023 and would make a great addition to your operation. Also getting details on a 75-acre irrigated farm in southern York County. Watch the website for details on this one. Back to you, Max.
Hey, John, thanks so much. We appreciate it. We can see the geography of the great state of Nebraska behind you there. We know that you know that state so well. We have many great friends from North Platte through Grand Island all the way up to West Point in that major agriculture area. Well, Greg Solier is watching not just that part of the country, but he's taking a look at the early weeks of 2024 and his forecast this weekend on This Week in Agribusiness. Greg's coming up.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Ringing out the old year, we have to look into the early days of the new year with Greg Solier's perspective and a little longer view, perhaps, through the winter season. Somebody asked me, how can he do this? How can he look out that far in advance? What's your methodology?
It's science. It's experience in forecasting. It's a gentleman by the name of Earl Finkel. It's a lot of stuff. Yes, exactly. Mostly experience at this point in my career.
Well, let's look at this El Nino thing. Is it diminishing?
It's beginning to, but we'll really get into it here as we get deeper into the winter season. But a good point that you brought up, Max, is El Nino. Let's take a look at it. And it's really how we've gotten to this point, the soup to nuts, the really sausage-making part of meteorology here. You have the main polar branch of the jet stream, which has been riding across the Pacific Northwest, an occasional burst of cold air into parts of New England, the Corn Belt, the Mid-Atlantic region. This is where we've seen a lot of the storminess so far in the winter season, parts of the Pacific Northwest, and then a little more typical traditional El Nino, but we haven't seen much of it, nor do we expect a lot of it into Southern California, the desert Southwest, the Gulf Coast. Here, this green arrowed area would be the subtropical jet, Max. So we've got moisture here, cold here, and much of the Corn Belt areas. Plain states and points on westward, mild and dry. Those winds come roaring out of the Rockies, downslope of conditions, compressional warming, as we call it in the weather business. Is how we come up with the warmth, if you will, relative to wintertime, and an absence of any significant snow on the ground so far.
Still quite a bit of an area of the United States that is too dry.
Exactly. The drought highlights, if you will, going into the new year. A lot of the country here, more than half to 3/4, in some sense of too dry category. Pacific Northwest, up near the Canadian border, much of the heartland, sections of the eastern Corn Belt, really the worst of it here. Tennessee Valley, Mid-South, lower Mississippi Valley, Delta region, Texas, southwestern states, and back into parts of the plains. A little too dry despite some recent snowfall into the northeast and New England. Going forward, we don't really anticipate here into the early stretch of wintertime and through midwinter time really any significant improvement. Yeah, we do like to get improvement. There's not a lot of frost or freeze in the ground, so some snowfall would help. But really, it's been focused into this part of the country where we will see some dryness improvement here relative to snowpack and snow cover. Some improvement, not a lot though. Southern Mid-Atlantic, Gulf Coast, parts of Texas, the Rio Grande, into the lower desert region, and the Pacific Northwest. But Max, a lot of the country expected to see the drought persist relative to wintertime or perhaps worsen. So there are trade-offs to El Nino. Mild and dry in some areas, comfortable for outdoor work, not great with soil moisture in mind.
We think back over the years, and the first few weeks of the new year are often very cold days. How do you see the early part of January 24 in terms of temperature?
Well, El Nino still holding on. It's a moderate category 1, and it's not like we're chasing ping pong balls around here. You just don't throw a switch and all of a sudden we're back into a neutral state atmosphere. So it continues on, a delightful go of it. Not great if you're in the snowplow business or looking for insulation in some of those fields with snow cover. Look at the warmth over the Canadian prairie, the northern plains, much of the upper Midwest into the northeast of New England, parts of the Pacific Northwest as well. Temperatures about normal through California, the southern plains, and the southeastern parts of the country, and through early January, Max, a bit below average across the Gulf Coast areas, where we do anticipate a little further improvement to the storm track. It's not going to be a robust El Nino, mind you, and those El Nino years, they vary whenever we do come up with them, but some semblance of moisture, Southern California, down through the Rio Grande, the Gulf Coast area, and look at the expanse of quiet weather relative to early January in the heart of wintertime across the plains, the Midwest, and a good chunk of the Corn Belt, sir.
My goodness, we might get a little bit of a break on heating bills this winter. Let's look at mid-January.
Things begin to turn, the effects of a weakening El Nino, and we've seen some of these cold air intrusions. Just because you're into a mild El Nino setup doesn't mean you're not going to deal with Arctic air or winter storms, just fewer of them. But as you weaken this El Nino setup, more and more of them will come into fruition. So here's some cold air once again laying out across the northern parts of the country, up towards the Sioux, the warmth compressed down across the Mid-Atlantic region, the southern plains, the western parts of the country, good part of the central Midwest and Corn Belt. Temperatures about normal, same with areas down towards Dixie. And precipitation, here we go, Max, beginning to see a pickup in the Pacific Northwest. More traditional winter weather here into the northern plains, much of the northern and eastern Corn Belt, eastern states as well, and a quiet weather picture down through Texas and the desert Southwest.
Talk about the time of the Louisville Farm Show, the middle part of February. We can still see some wintry precip then, to be sure. And it can often be quite cold.
Yeah, cold, and sometimes it's those freezing rain events and icing events down towards the Ohio Valley. But the cold air easing just a bit across the Great Lakes region into the northeast of New England, the warm ridge, if you will, relative to winter time on the southern plains, parts of the western states, and a fair amount of the upper Midwest down to the Ohio Valley. Temperatures on target for mid-February into mid-March. Otherwise, here we go with a little busier storm track. Clipper systems into the upper Midwest, northern sections of the Corn Belt, Mid-Atlantic region. Normal precip over the southeast down towards the Rio Grande Desert Southwest. So as we get deeper on into the wintertime season, Max, the weather turns a little more wintry as you would expect.
All right, sir, stand by. Greg will be right back with his spring outlook.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
We know how that pendulum can swing in the weather from the winter going into the spring. Greg, how do you see this?
A little bit of everything for everyone, Max. Hopefully some drought improvement, or at the same time, really no substantial, we think, planting delays as well. Should be able to move along here at a relatively good pace and hopefully get some additional recharge in some of the worst drought areas of the country. So weakening El Nino means a little above average and some early season snowmelt getting underway, but we don't see a big moisture pattern for California this particular winter season going around into the southeastern part of the country. Some warming of soils with warmth here up to about the Ohio Valley. There's cold air, but it's really over the snowpack through the Canadian Prairie and points out of the east, and nothing really bitter or biting about it. And with a little troughiness, the U-shaped configuration over the nation's midsection here, precipitation about normal back into the northern plains, a little weather than average for the southern Corn Belt on into the southeastern states. Probably some field work delays, but drought improvement as well in this particular corridor. West Texas cotton across the Intermountain West, Max, below average moisture expected out there. So we start the spring off in normal, typical fashion.
I always wonder about spring storminess, especially when I see the cold to the north and the warmth to the south and where they get together.
That's right, exactly. And sometimes those temperatures at the surface, while they range greatly, they also range greatly up aloft too. That strengthens the winds, the jet stream pattern, and that's how you get these spring storms to wind on up. Temperatures about normal, big sky country across the plains, the heart of the Corn Belt. We'll get these little tentacles of some cold air wrapping around the Sioux and into areas of the northern and eastern Great Lakes region. Worst of the cold, Hudson Bay, James Bay, warmth down through Florida, the Gulf Coast areas for the spring breakers, back through Texas and across the western reaches of the country too. Moisture, a little more expected here across the mid-Atlantic region, down through Florida way, some additional drought improvement, wet weather, including some late season snows for the northeast and New England. Normal precip, we'll take it throughout the Corn Belt. Worsening drought maybe down through Texas and Oklahoma, the southwestern part of the country, and a little more in the way of normal precip for Big Sky Country and the Pacific Northwest.
We know spring can stay so cool so long sometimes. When we get into that period of mid-May to mid-June this year, how do you see that?
From a temperature standpoint, kind of much the way you'd expected to see. Not much the way of an extreme temperatures, a little below average into the northern Great Lakes region. Warmth down through Dixie Ways, the southern Corn Belt, back into the plains sections of the western states. So a little above, a little below, nothing too out of control there. From a moisture standpoint, probably by now we'll have needed the need for moisture, and you'll get it there. Showers, a couple of thunderstorms as well. Parts of the Corn Belt, late season snow up towards the Sioux, normal precipitation over the southeastern part of the country, West Texas cotton, desert southwest, and across the rest of the west. Below average moisture is expected. Normal precip, by the way, for the Pacific Northwest.
We close out the show with a special feature on Big Iron's Share Your Legacy program. The legacies of America's rural communities deserve to be memorialized and shared with great joy. And Big Iron has traveled the country doing just that. Let's take a look at some of these special stories that reveal a beautiful tradition of hard work, perseverance, and love. Big Iron Auctions is proud to share your legacy.
Homesteading was when the pioneers that came west had an opportunity to homestead, and most of them could homestead 80 acres, but since my great-grandfather was in the Civil War, all Civil War veterans were allowed to homestead 160 acres. Well, my great-grandfather was in Civil War, and he was in Philadelphia. He was called to duty at Old Independence Hall when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and he stood guard duty over the front of the casket for 12 hours controlling the crowds.
Oh, okay. You gotta smile. See, that's the one. She's the star of the show. Yeah, I love cows. Cows, if you ask me my favorite animal, I was always the dork. It was like cows, and people are like, that's so lame. Like, I know. I love dairy cows. I do enjoy cow puns, people that dress like cows, things that have cow print on them. Big fan of all of it. So we're sitting here at my grandma's house just outside of Wahoo, Nebraska. My family, the Konetskis, originally settled here in 1877. So
we head to Lexington, Illinois this week to meet a farm family that owes everything to faith and a dad who flew over 100 combat missions during World War II.
Faith was very important. I grew up going to church before I was even born because my folks were going to church and still go to the same church that they took me to when I was growing up. My dad's faith, he said, was good, but it became really strong when he was in World War II. He was a pilot, and he flew over 100 combat missions. And he said it wasn't any doings of his, but only by the grace of God that he came back. So he always, said he didn't know anybody could farm and not have faith because we don't have control over much of anything, the weather or the markets or anything else. So he loved the Lord and he loved the land, and he passed that on to me.
As Scott Glenn once said, rodeo riders are the last of the true chivalrous group of people. It's a place where the competition is really pure. If that's true, then the most pure place in America 1 week in September every year is Fort Madison, Iowa.
Rodeo is a true American sport, and we have everything. Nashville entertainment, the best cowboys in the world, one of the best stock contractors in the world with the best animals in the world, and it all comes together one weekend here in a great package to entertain anyone and everyone.
This week we travel to the Texas Panhandle and to the town of Sunray, where the Cartwright family has proudly been farming and ranching for over 100 years.
My granddad came here, bought his first land in 1919 and started farming then. His wife, my grandmother, they had land in this area as well.
Throughout the Share Your Legacy series, we've discovered some amazing equipment. We recently visited one of the largest collections to date. We caught up with Jim Meinhardt of Wamego, Kansas.
Well, we started in 1967, farm equipment business. We represented Alice Chalmers and New Holland Equipment. Started with a 50 by 100 building in Wamego and 3 employees, and it is now called Can Equip, 14 dealerships across Kansas and Nebraska. Well, to start with, I want to preserve the history, and this is one way of doing it.
This week, Share Your Legacy is in Arapahoe, Wyoming, where a young man took a chance in the 1940s to follow his dream of farming.
My dad came here from Mitchell, Nebraska in 1945. He found a guy down the road and shared a house with him till he found some place to go. When he drove by here, there was a seismograph truck sitting out in the middle of a weed field, making a test hole. He walked over and dropped a rock in it, and there was water in it. So he found the guy that owned it and rented it.
Started with nothing. I mean, literally drove by. He bought a 1948 Chevy truck before he had a car or a pickup to start his farming operation out here. The river bridge you guys crossed on the way down here was not there. They had to drive across the river.
Well, when I was growing up, I started at an age where I didn't know really what was going on. It was all hearsay. And I was just with Dad all the time. That's all I knew.
Jackie, was that amazing?
Yes, it was.
2023 was such an exciting year for Big Iron and for the Share Your Legacy series. I wish you could have seen some of the shows that we got to see that you didn't get to see, but we only had so much time. Looking forward to working with you all in 2024. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks again for such a great year. For all of our employees, our buyers, our sellers, everybody in the community that we live and work within, we really appreciate the impact that you made at Big Iron over this past year. As we look to 2024, we have so many exciting things coming down the pike. We're really excited to share with you a lot of new things that will be available on the Big Iron platform, and look forward to continuing to do business with you in this next year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you to Big Iron Auctions for joining us on our final show of 2023. This Week in Agribusiness is excited to see you all in the new year. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH.
This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.